Kia ora, and welcome to Riftbound. This is the second video in a series of videos aimed to make you a more confident player ready for their first Nexus night. What we'll be going over in this game is a game between Master Yi and Jinx. This game will be focused on teaching you a few more of the interesting aspects of the game, but most importantly, going through an entire game demonstrating how things happen and why it's important to keep an open mind about how this game is played. Without further ado, we are now in the Mulligan stage of our game between the two legends. We can see here that Jinx has available to her the spell Star-Crossed, a 3 energy, 1 purple power at reaction speed. What is reaction speed? We'll get there, don't worry. We have the spell Hard Bargain, which is a 2 energy, the unit Tide Turner, and the unit Treasure Hunter. Both of these cost 2 energy, but you can see here that one of them has a few more words on them, and one of them has a little less might. We like this opening hand, you'll understand eventually why, but for now, we like it, so we are going to keep it. The Master Yi is going to decide to keep they're going to mulligan one and keep their other opening hand otherwise, and it is now the beginning of the game. A, B, C, D, awaken, nothing to awaken. B, beginning phase. If we read here, Jinx Loose Cannon's ability. At the start of your beginning phase, if you have one or fewer cards in your hand, draw one. That, we have definitely more of one, will not trigger, and so we have no beginning phase at this stage to consider. C, channel 2 runes, and D, draw one. We drew the Brazen Buccaneer, a 6 energy 5 might unit that has, as you play me, you may discard a card as an additional cost. If you do, reduce my cost by 2. For our opening hand, we will play for 2 exhausted runes to make 2 energy, a Treasure Hunter to our base. The Treasure Hunter says, when I move, play a gold gear token exhausted. Now, what are tokens and what is gold? Well, tokens are units or gear that come from outside of your deck or your hand that have some introduction into the game. In this case, gold gear, which is what can be used to substitute power. A lot of words, I know, but don't worry, all you need to know is that when he moves, he does something pretty cool. As for the Master Yi, he will begin because he went second by channeling 3 runes on his first turn, but still drawing 1 card. He will begin by exhausting 2 runes, or tapping 2 runes, in order to play out a Lonely Porro. Now, Lonely Porro is an interesting one that introduces a new tag, which says Deahtknell. Now, most tags in the game have an explanation of what they are or how they work below them. In this case, when I die, get the effect. And the effect in this case is, if I died alone, draw 1. Pretty self-explanatory what that means, but you'd be surprised sometimes it can get a little more interesting than that. Otherwise, they'll pass their turn, and it now becomes our turn. A, B, C, D. Awaken your units in your runes and your gear. B, beginning phase. Well, our unit here doesn't have a beginning phase, and we have more than 1 card. So as such, we've got nothing to do with that set. C, we channel 2 runes, and D, we drew another Tide Turner. We now have a few options available to us. We have 4 runes to our name, and we have a ready to unit. The battlefields this game are Zorn Warrens and Star Spring. We chose the Zorn Warrens because it best fits what we want to do in the game, so that's probably where we're going to move first. But sometimes our battlefield is just there to be a hindrance to both players, and we end up fighting over the same battlefield anyway. So we'll begin this turn by moving our Treasure Hunter to the Zorn Warrens. He first moves and triggers his ability. Play a gold gear token exhausted. If I go to the tokens here, you can see there are a lot to choose from, but don't be overwhelmed. We want the gold gear. Now gold says, kill this. Oh, very abrupt. Tap it, in other words, exhaust it, and it is a reaction speed, add power. That symbol is the universal symbol for all colors to mean power. We will now add this to our base, exhaust it, because it says play a gold gear token exhausted. It is important to note that while it doesn't say where it's meant to be played, all gear lives in base. The exception is equipment, but that's because it's technically part of the unit's equipment, so that makes sense. The gold is now played to this base. We have concluded the move ability of the Treasure Hunter, but we've moved into a battlefield we did not control. The opponent doesn't control it, which is nice to know, but we have now done what is known entering into a showdown. There are two types of showdown. We've got this, which is a showdown, and we have a combat showdown, which the only difference is if this Lonely Poro did live at the Zorn Warrens. And that way we are entering into the Master Yi's territory and a fight would begin. What a showdown is, and a combat showdown, is it is an opportunity for all players involved, in this case myself and the Master Yi, to engage in strategy to either make sure I get this battlefield or I really don't get this battlefield. I have available to me a few cards at my disposal. It is now important to bring into the repertoire the idea of action and reaction. These are the only two types of cards that can be played during a showdown. If it seems a bit confusing immediately, I understand. It's sometimes one of the harder things to get really under the belt. All you need to know is that right now we are in a showdown, and that means we are limited to action or reaction cards. As we are the attacker, we have moved in, it is our turn to go first, or we have priority to do what we want to do. Sometimes that may be playing a card that gives us the upper edge, or it may be playing a card that really doesn't do much, but it's just nice to have. For this, because we are not currently threatened to lose this fight, we're not going to worry about playing any of our cards. But what could we do? Well, with 3 runes available to us, we could play Star-Crossed because it says it is a reaction card. Play anytime, even before spells and abilities resolve. We have Hard Bargain, which is another reaction. And then we have a unit that has neither of those, another unit that has neither of those, and another unit which has neither of those. The gold does have a reaction we could use, but because it is exhausted and not ready, we cannot use it currently, which means we will be passing our priority as the initiator over to the Master Yi, who has now the response, well, the opportunity to respond to our showdown or interest in conquering this battlefield. They have nothing they can do for 2 reasons. Firstly, 2 of their cards are currently exhausted, which means they only have 1 rune to really use. Secondly, they don't have a unit at this battlefield, which really limits their opportunity to respond in a way such as either increasing the might of their unit or pushing their unit away to protect it. As such, the Master Yi cannot stop this conquer, and Jinx will get the first conquer point. Now, I'm going to quickly reverse the conquer point so we can explain a more important part of this, but think of it like this. We have now conquered. We now do everything that involves conquering, which includes Zorn Warren itself, which says when you conquer here, discard 1 and draw 1. Funnily enough, conquering also includes getting a point. These 2 things now happen at the same time. We're going to decide that we're going to get the point first, but it'll matter a bit later on. We now have to discard a card from our hand, which is what that means, and draw 1 from our main deck. We have 2 of these cards, so I'm probably going to discard this one into my trash. And you can see it now lives here face up. I will now draw 1 as the other part of that, and that means that I have now resolved the conquer. I have done everything I was required to do, and now the showdown is complete. Why is it so important to have such clear boundaries on this? Well, it's because during a showdown you can only play action or reaction cards, and as we saw, these units don't actually have either of those, which means we can't play either of these cards during a showdown. But now that it has been a showdown conclusion, we can play them. We are looking at this card here, 6 energy, very large, but it says, as you play me, you may discard a card as an additional cost. If you do, reduce my cost by 1. So I may decide to play the Brazen Buccaneer to my base. And then I could discard a card in order to only make it cost 4, which is how many runes I have. Obviously I can't discard the gold because I have to discard a card from my hand. I am going to choose to play the Brazen Buccaneer to my base, and I'm going to choose to remove the Hard Bargain from my hand. It will cost me 4 runes still to play the card, but I have now played the Brazen Buccaneer to my base, and now I can pass my turn. There are a few other things I could have done, but we'll discuss that in a short moment. It is now the Master Yi's turn. A, B, C, D, Awaken units, beginning phase, channel 2, draw 1. They have 5 runes, because keep in mind, turn 1 they had 3, and now they have an additional 2, bringing us to 5. They're going to begin their turn by moving over to their chosen battlefield, Starspring. They are going to decide to pass priority because they know that we have no runes, we have no way to respond to this action, and as such, they get the point. Now, the fun thing is while Starspring doesn't have a Conquer ability, it does have another ability. The first time a player plays a non-token unit here, what does that mean? Well, as we see on this is a token gear. If we look at a card such as the Recruit, it is a token unit. This is the specific thing they mean, is you cannot play a unit that has the token tag on it. That is all that means. The other part says they may move another unit pair they control to base. So if they were to play another Lonely Porro to this battlefield, it would trigger, meaning they may move this Lonely Porro back to their base if they wished. Well, what will the Master Yi do? They are going to tap 2 runes in order to play a Scuttle Crab to that battlefield. How can they play a unit to a battlefield? I thought you could only play units to base. Well, here's a really important thing to know. Many people don't realize this when they first play the game, and it's because it's very, unintuitive. It's because once you control a battlefield, and in this case, the Jinx holds the Zorn Warrens, it is part of its territory. And once something is part of your territory, you can expand your play border to include that battlefield. So in this case, the Master Yi controls the Starspring, which means they can play units from their hand straight to that battlefield. It is part of their territory. But why can't they play it to Zorn Warrens? It's a battlefield. It's because they don't have a unit there. In other words, they don't control it. That is the simplest explanation on why. Scuttle Crab has 0 might. What's this about? Well, they have to add the specific tag. Units with 0 might can conquer and hold. When you play me, draw 1, which they've done. And it has another Deahtknell. Choose an opponent, they reveal their hand. And you can look at their face down cards this turn, gain 1 experience. Whoa, that is a lot of words. And all you need to know right now is, it does something when it dies, so don't worry about it for now. The Master Yi is going to decide to trigger the Starspring, which means they are allowed to bring another unit they control from here to its base, which they will do now. Now you might be wondering, how was the Lonely Porro allowed to move if it was exhausted? Because only ready-to units can move. Well, it's because the Starspring is not itself moving the unit the same way. When you move a unit physically without the assistance of, in this case, a battlefield or a card, it must be readied. However, there are some cards in the game, such as Starspring, that says move, and those do not require the unit to be readied or exhausted, it just doesn't. So for the purposes of this, the Lonely Porro goes back to base, and the Master Yi has 3 runes available to them. They are going to decide to tap 2 more, play out another Lonely Porro. Look at him, he's got a friend, he's not so lonely anymore, but he still looks pretty sad. And they will pass their turn with 1 rune remaining. Because we held this battlefield until our A, B, C, D stage, we get to do something. A, Awaken. B, Beginning Phase. Beginning Phase includes if you hold a battlefield, get a point. While we did unfortunately have to discard 2 cards, we still are above 1, which means our Jinx Loose Cannon does not trigger. We see Channel 2 bringing us to 6 and D draw 1, bringing out the Unlicensed Armory. Now what we are going to do is we are going to play for 2 a Tide Turner back to base. Tide Turner has the special ability that says when you play me, you may choose a friendly unit, move me to its location, and it to my original location. I'm going to choose the Treasure Hunter, which means that these two will swap places. But it moved, why is it readied? As I said, some things can move cards. The only time a unit becomes exhausted is if it moves itself. But the move trigger for Treasure Hunter still triggers, which means we get another nice gold exhausted to base. Now, what we have available to us is an option. We can move this wonderful 1 might Treasure Hunter into Starspring and begin a combat showdown, or we can move the Brazen Buccaneer to this battlefield and begin a showdown, or we can move both of them at the same time to this battlefield and begin a showdown. Why would we want to not just send in the 1 might unit? Well, it's because while this Scuttle Crab is technically a 0 might unit, Master Yi Wuju's Bladesman legend ability says while a friendly unit, defends alone, it gets +2 might. And so while this Scuttle Crab is at 0, technically, if I was to move my Treasure Hunter with 1 might into this battlefield, this unit will now be defending alone, and it will get 2 might. So we must move in a larger unit to compensate, and as such, the Brazen Buccaneer would be a really good choice for that. But why wouldn't we also move the Treasure Hunter in? Well, it's because even though this would be at 2 and this is at 5, it doesn't mean that the Scuttle Crab cannot kill the Treasure Hunter if it decided to move in. And as such, we don't want to lose the Treasure Hunter just yet, and we're going to move the Brazen Buccaneer into this battlefield. There are no move triggers on the Brazen Buccaneer. However, on defense, the Master Yi trigger will activate, giving this Scuttle Crab a wonderful 2 might, which we can see noted by the 2 here. It is currently a 5 to 2 might. We can now play any action or reaction during this combat showdown. We have available to us Starcrossed, which isn't actually a bad option. We also have a unit? Interesting. Sometimes units can actually have action or reaction triggers. This one in particular is an action that means that a reaction that says play at any time, even before spells and abilities resolve, including to a battlefield you control. Ooh, we don't control this battlefield though. That's weird. If we continue reading, it says Assault, which is a new tag for us, which is Assault 2, which means if you are the attacker, you get +2 might. So this would go from a 3 to a 5. And the last line is what's so important. I can be played to a battlefield you're attacking, which means that I can play this Rengar to this battlefield if I wanted right now. Even though it wasn't a unit that I had control of in my base, it's because it has the reaction tag, and it says I can be played to a battlefield you're attacking. Now, I don't think that I need this, because this is a 5 against a 2. Gosh, why would I need that? So I'm going to say no, I pass priority. What have you got, bucko? And as such, the Master Yi is going to say, I've got something. Keep in mind, I've passed priority, which means I can no longer play action cards. I can only play reaction cards. But the Master Yi, oh, now they can play action cards. They're going to use their 1 rune to make 1 energy, and then they're going to do something called recycle. Now, recycling a rune is how you create power. Power is color dependent, so if you recycle a red rune, you'll create a red power. If you recycle a purple, you'll create a purple power. Same with green and orange, you'll create green and orange power. They are going to choose to play Punch first, which is 1 energy, which they have just created, but also 2 orange power, which if we see them now, 1, 2, they've recycled 2 orange power in order to play this card. Now this card is an action card, which means they can play it during their turn or in showdowns when it is their priority, and give a unit +5? Oh no. Well, that means that they're going to target their Scuttle Crab. We have an option now. This has not resolved. They have said, I want to play it. What are you going to do about it? I have a few options available to me. I can either play Star-Crossed, because as it says, reaction can be played even before spells and abilities resolve, and as we know, this has not resolved. I could play Star-Crossed in order to return a friendly unit and an enemy unit to their owner's hands, and that could be used to target the Scuttle Crab and, let's say, my own Treasure Hunter. Or I could use Rengar, who has 3 plus the 2 from attacking, and move him to the battlefield to further support my Brazen Buccaneer. Now this is where a bit of strategy comes into mind. If I was to use Star-Crossed, it does mean later on, if a big unit comes from Master Yi, I can't remove it so easily. But it also means that their spell, this right now, won't work, and my Brazen Buccaneer will survive. Using the Rengar, however, means that while the Scuttle Crab will die and the spell will resolve, I will still control this battlefield. That is because my 3 plus 2, so my 5 might, and this 5 might will be a total of 10 against what will be this 2 plus this 5, 7. I think for this purpose, I am going to not play the Rengar, but instead play the Star-Crossed Lover. Now notice that it costs 1 purple rune. Instead of recycling one of my Chaos runes, I'm going to use my gold. And the gold says, if you kill this, create a power. And so that's what I'm going to do. This gold will now be put in my discards, and I have now paid for my Star-Crossed. I will be targeting the Scuttle Crab, and I'll be targeting my Treasure Hunter. It is now the Master Yi's turn to respond with another card if they wished. But unfortunately for them, they have no runes available to them, and as such, they are going to let the Star-Crossed resolve, meaning that this Treasure Hunter comes back to hand, and the Scuttle Crab for them will come back to hand. The Punch First will now resolve, but notice that because they targeted the Scuttle Crab, they no longer have a valid target. And this is something that's really important with Riftbound, is once you've chosen something, you can't choose again. And so while they still have units they could technically target the Punch First with, their original target is gone, and so that spell is going to what is known as fizzle. It's going to do nothing. It's like throwing a rock into a circle, and someone moves the circle, but you still have to throw the rock where it was. You do nothing, and there's no point to it. Thankfully for us, that means that this showdown resolves. And as such, we get a point for that conquer. This is, as we mentioned, not a conquer trigger. This does not have a conquer trigger. And there is nothing else to do for this turn, and so we pass. It is now the Master Yi's turn. And what they're going to decide is they are kind of sick of what we just did to them, and they want revenge. They're going to exhaust 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 runes and recycle an orange to play Rengar Trophy Hunter. Rengar Trophy Hunter is an ambush unit, which is a reaction unit that can be played to a battlefield where you have units, but we just saw that we have a unit the same thing, Rengar Pouncing, that has the same ability that says I can be played to a battlefield or attacking. What does Rengar do? We don't have any Master Yi units that are attacking. Well, Rengar Trophy Hunter says I can be played to a battlefield where there are enemy units, even if you have no units there. Meaning that they get to choose which of these 2 battlefields they just want to throw him onto. This once again completely subverts that initial idea we knew about where units can be played, but they explain why. The Rengar says, hey look, that was really rude. I'm going to move to the Star Spring, and you can't do anything to stop me. I am going to now pass priority because they're out of runes. There's nothing they can do. I am going to now have to pass priority because I've got 1 rune, but as we can see, none of my cards cost 1 energy. So unfortunately for us, this Rengar with its 6 might is definitely going to beat my Brazen Buccaneer at 5 might. And my Brazen Buccaneer will die and I will lose that battlefield, but the Master Yi will get a point for the conquer. They will now be moving their Lonely Poro with their 2 might into my Tide Turner with its own 2 might. And you might initially think, why are they trading? Well, it kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that if my Tide Turner dies, they just move their other Lonely Poro into its battlefield, but also why didn't they just move both of these at the same time? Well, it's because of Lonely Poro's Deahtknell requirement that says I have to die alone if you want this extra card. And as such, while I may be losing this battlefield, and they may be losing a unit, they draw one for the death of the unit, and they just move this Poro in and go, cool, I now get a point for that conquer. And what's that? I now have to discard one and draw one? Well, that Scuttle Crab that you made me put back in my hand, that's going to go away. And I get to draw a card in its place. They are now going to pass their turn, it's going to become mine, and what I thought was such an overwhelmingly strong position has completely flipped on me, and I am in a very bad position. Keep in mind, while we're both at 3 points, they have 2 units here, and they will go to 5 points next turn, and you only need 8 to win, which means I need to quickly figure out a way to figure this out. Now, if we're looking at our hand, we have a gear, we have a unit, we have another unit, and we have a spell. But we have a 5th card that we can use, and that is Jinx Rebel. Jinx Rebel says, when you discard 1 or more cards, ready me and give me +1 this turn. She costs 5 energy and 1 purple power. Now you might be wondering, why is the circle not white? Well, we saw the same thing with the Rengar, and that is because certain cards are of epic, and that means that they've got a full border artwork such as this, but they just change the layout slightly. So instead of a white circle, it's a white number instead of a white circle and black number. It doesn't really matter. But what we're going to do is we're going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and recycle the gold to pay for the 1 purple power that the Jinx would cost, and play her to battlefield base exhausted. We cannot play her to battlefield because we control neither battlefield. Next, we have a few options available to us. I am going to, for 2, play out Unlicensed Armory. Now, Unlicensed Armory says, discard 1 and exhaust this. Choose a friendly unit. The next time it dies this turn, you may pay 1 to recall it, exhaust it instead. Send it to base, this isn't a move. Recall is just another word that is important to know. Because Unlicensed Armory is a gear, unlike units, it comes in ready. What we are now going to do is we're going to do exactly what it says. We're going to discard 1, which is our treasure hunter, and we're going to exhaust it, and we're going to choose our Jinx. And it says, the next time it dies, if I can pay 1 red power in order to recall it. In other words, save it from death. We now need to read Jinx. When you discard 1 or more cards this turn, ready me, and give me +1. Which we will note by making her a 6 with this wonderful number here. The next thing we can do is we can now move Jinx because she's readied. Well, we've got 2 options. We could move into this battlefield, or we could move into this battlefield. Keep in mind that if we move into this battlefield, while this Rengar is a 6, we need to remember that Master Yi's Wuju Bladesman actually makes him a 8 with the +2 on defense. And with a 6, that ain't going to make the difference. Over here, this 2 would become a 4, much more achievable. But do we have anything else available to us that might make this better? We have a card called Vault Breaker, which is an action card, which means we can play it on our turn or in showdowns, that gives a unit +2 assault and ganking this turn. Ooh, +2 assault, that could be fun. +2 assault obviously would make this an 8, which means we could fight this Rengar on equal terms, and while we might die, because we can spend a red power, to recall it, we would actually be trading instead. And there's another layer to this entirely, which is that means we'd only have 1 card in hand, which means we would finally be able to use Jinx's legend ability because we'd have 1 or fewer cards in hand at the start of the turn. This seems really complex, and it's understandable why. It's because sometimes turns, although they seem so simple at the beginning, can have deeper and deeper layers. So what we're going to do is we're going to use 1 rune to make 1 energy, recycle 1 red in order to play Vault Breaker, where they're going to target our Jinx with the Vault Breaker, giving it an additional 2 might, and this thing called ganking. Now ganking says it can move from battlefield to battlefield, and I will signify that with this wonderful little symbol here, just to show it can go either way. Why ganking? Well, that's just nice to have, but usually you can't move from a battlefield to another battlefield without ganking. So we'll now be moving into this battlefield as such. There are no move triggers, so that resolves. We now do defend and attack triggers. We have no attack triggers. They have a defense trigger, making their Rengar an 8. It is an 8 to 8, and as such, I'm happy to say I'm out of runes, you're out of runes, let's resolve this as is. Their Rengar will die, however, our Jinx would usually die because it is 8 versus 8, clashing to 0, but instead I'm going to use this to recycle 1 red in order to bring it back to base exhausted. I am happy to say I pass. You know what? You can keep that battlefield over there. I just took down a very, very big opponent. The Master Yi will begin their turn by saying, congrats, I get a point for the hold, and unlucky for you, I'm going to tap 5, recycle 1 orange to play out here. And I go, no, you can't do that. And they're going to say, why? And I say, because you didn't read the card correctly. And it says you can play it to a battlefield where there are enemy units. There are no enemy units there, which means you can't play it there. And they have to go, oh, well, I guess I'm playing it to base then. You could, if you were nice, say, hey, take it back. Put it back in hand. But we're not going to be nice right now. We want to win this game. So we're going to say, no, you made a mistake. Too bad. And they're going to go, well, that sucks. I pass. You know what? Good on ya. We're going to reduce our Jinx's might back down to 5 because technically the turn had ended. I did misorder that slightly. And so we drew another card, but keep in mind, A, B, C, D. Awaken phase, we readied our unit, our gear, and our runes. Beginning phase, we had 1 or cards fewer in our hand, so we can draw an additional card. Channel 2, draw 1. Misordering, unfortunately for online, does mean that they draw 1 instinctively, but we now begin our turn. We have available to us an Undying Legion, which is a unit, and a Darius, which is another unit. Undying Legion has a new tag that we need to be aware of, which is Legion, which says you may play me from your trash for 3 energy, 1 red power. That'll be useful later on, and Legion has the specific get the effect if you've played another card this turn. We're now looking at this and going, oh, they've got 1 rune. What are we going to do this turn? Well, I think that we need to just conquer this battlefield. The Master Yi is going to go, yeah, have that battlefield, go for it. And we now have available to us the event option to play a unit to this battlefield to continue controlling it, and then trigger the Star Spring. What would that look like? Well, let us go 1, 2, 3, and recycle 1 red in order to play the Rengar pouncing to this battlefield. Why the pouncing? Doesn't matter, we just wanted a unit to this battlefield. We will now trigger the Jinx movement ability of the Star Spring, which allows us to return it to base. We will then be discarding 1 and exhausting in order to trigger the Jinx's ability, which allows her to be readied, and gain 1 extra might this turn. Now there are 2 things really important to note right now. Darius, we can play, and it says when you played your 2nd card this turn, give me +2 this turn and ready me. Technically we have played the Rengar pouncing, and so if we were to play the Darius, that would be our 2nd card and he would come in ready. Secondly, the Undying Legion has the ability that says you may play me from your trash for 3 energy, 1 might. We have played 2 cards this turn. Well, we've played 1 card this turn, so it means we can do this if we wanted. But this, we're not too worried about right now. We are instead going to tap those 5, recycle 1, to bring out Darius. Because that was our 2nd card, he is now readied and is a 7 might. And you might be wondering, why? Why would we need so much might? And that's because we are going to move both of these units over to this battlefield. Why 2 units? Because it's nice to have a big, strong defensive wall against something like a green-orange, and that comes with practice. The Master Yi is going to go, hey look, that's a lot of might. I'm not going to be able to do anything about that. Cool. You kill my sad little Poro, you monster. So the Poro will die. For the Deahtknell of the Poro, they will draw an extra card, and we get a point for the conquer. We must now discard 1 and draw 1, but we can't discard 1. Does that mean we can still draw 1? When it comes to things such as this, you must do everything possible on the card so long as it is non-reliant. And that sounds very complicated, but essentially it says, if it said discard 1 If you did draw one, we couldn't. But because it says discard then draw, we're still allowed to draw a card, which is really good for us. We see it as another Rengar pouncing, and because we are now ending the turn, because we have nothing left to do, the mites of our Jinx and Darius will go back to before the turn had resolved, and we will pass. The Master Yi is going to be at 4 points and have available to them the Rengar pouncing, 7 runes, and 7 cards. They are going to decide what they want to do, which will be first and foremost to move into this battlefield. I can't do anything about this, unfortunately, which means my Rengar will die. They will get a point for the conquer, and they now get to go back to the drawing board. They're going to play a first mate for 3 energy to this battlefield. And first mate says, when you play me, ready another unit. They are going to target with this ability, the Rengar Trophy Hunter, readying it. The Star Spring is now going to trigger, and they are going to resolve that by moving the Rengar back to base. Keep in mind, while the Rengar was moved, it was not him moving, so he does not exhaust. Which means the Rengar is now available to be moved again. At this battlefield is 10 might, and this Rengar is a 6. Because he'll be attacking and defending, he does not get the +2, which means he has to be quite careful in what he does next. He will begin by exhausting 2 runes to play out a Discipline. Discipline says, give a unit +2 this turn, draw 1. Which means he will be targeting, believe it or not, the Rengar Trophy Hunter, and moving it from a 6 might up to an 8 might this turn, and drawing 1 to resolve the card. The next thing that they will be doing this turn is that they will be playing an On Guard, which is in 1 energy that says give a friendly unit +1 this turn. Then an additional +1 if it's the only unit you control here. Well, if we look, Rengar is the only unit they control here. And so the Rengar will get an additional 2 might, the On Guard will resolve, and the Rengar's going to move in. It's going to say, let's fight. I don't mind losing, but you're going to lose a lot more. And unfortunately, they're right. I'm going to lose both of these units because I can't get above the 10. The Rengar, however, because they're also 10, dies. And all of a sudden, this is a very bad play for both of us. The last thing is, they're going to pass. They have 1 unit to their name, and it is at a battlefield. The points are tied up, and we have 2 units to our name as well. Because we only had 1 card in hand at the beginning phase, we will be drawing an additional card for Loose Cannon. And we can see here that we will be unfortunately playing out the Rengar, which does not go to a battlefield because it's only a battlefield we're attacking, and the Treasure Hunter to our base. We could play out this gear, but it's not really important this turn. We'd rather keep the card in case we need to save a unit next turn. We will be passing. The Master Yi will go up to 6 points for the hold on the Star Spring, and they will be tapping 2 in order to play a Scuttle Crab to this battlefield. Scuttle Crab, as we remember, says when you play me, draw 1. They draw a card, and it has a Deahtknell. We won't worry about the Deahtknell right now. They will trigger the Star Spring by moving the first mate back to base, and because they did not move, the first mate did not move itself, it stays readied, which means they can now move in to this battlefield. They are going to be able to conquer because we cannot do anything about this, and they will go to 7 points. They have to trigger the discard, draw 1, and they'll be discarding another Scuttle Crab, which means we've seen 1, 2, 3 Scuttle Crabs this game from them. They'll go to 7, they will draw 1 for the point, and for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they'll be playing out a Ruin Runner to this battlefield. Ruin Runner says, I can't be chosen by enemy spells and abilities. That's a hassle. But they're going to pass, and they're going to say, well, good luck. We get an additional draw for the Loose Cannon, and we see it's a Longsword. Now, this is our first interaction with a gear that is an equipment. Longsword in particular has the ability to quick draw. This has reaction, which means you can play it before spells and abilities resolve. Attach it to a unit you control. Well, what does attaching do? Well, as we can see at the very bottom of the card, if it's to create the longer sword quickly ran into diminishing returns. Don't worry about that, that's flavor text. The important part is next to it, +2 might. That could be beneficial. if we look at the Rengar, we have a 3, and on attack he goes to 5. He can then move to, with the longsword, to 7. That's pretty good. Do we have a way to increase that might beyond that? Unfortunately not. We're using 2 energy and 1 power to attach the longsword to the Rengar. There are 2 options we could do here. We could, if we wanted, attach it to the treasure hunter first and move the treasure hunter in as a 3 against this 3 and kill it. And then we can move the Rengar in afterwards as a 5 against this to kill this, but then the Scuttle Crab would live anyway. To show what would happen, we will be playing out this instead as this scenario. Treasure Hunter is going to be equipping the longsword as such. He will now have a total might of 3. He will move, and his move trigger will create a gold token exhausted in base. We can now see that as a 3 into a 3, the Master Yi is going to let bygones be bygones, and they're going to trade. The first mate will die, and the treasure hunter will die, but the gear itself doesn't die. Gear itself can only be killed through things that specify kill gear. A great example of this is Thermo Beam, which says kill all gear. Very violent. But otherwise, these kind of things stick around quite nicely. We will now recycle, as it says below quick draw, equip for 1 red power. Attach this to a unit you control. Why we didn't have to pay this initially is because Longsword has the power built into the quick draw ability, which means you can attach it immediately without the cost. We will recycle 1 power, group it to the Rengar, which will move it to a 5, and we'll move the Rengar in. Because as an assault, he gets +2. The Ruin Runner will die, we will go to 6, and we will discard a card. We are going to discard the Unlicensed Armory and draw 1. We find another Treasure Hunter. Unfortunately for us, that is not a way for us to kill this Scuttle Crab, and so while we may go to 6 points this turn, and we have all the runes available to us, we can only do a Treasure Hunter to here, and we have to pass. Which means that the Master Yi has held this point and has gone to 8. Which means, unfortunately for us, the Master Yi has won this game. It is important to note, by the way, that I did actually miss a step there, because technically the Ruin Runner, when we were fighting at this battlefield earlier, one moment. At this battlefield, although this is a 7, we forgot about the Wuju Bladesman's trigger, which actually increases the Ruin Runner to a 7, which means that they would have traded, and we would have stayed at 5. And that even if we had a way to get this Treasure Hunter here, we have no way to equip the Longsword onto this Treasure Hunter because it would have been stuck on the Rengar. And so, for many reasons, that was unfortunately a very losing situation for the Jinx. And as such, the real situation of it is we would have stayed at 5, and this would have been the end result. It is the way game goes. You can't win everything, and sometimes it looks really promising, and then it looks absolutely disastrous, and then it looks promising again. But that's part of the fun of this game, is you're not guaranteed to win everything. You just have to use what is given to you and the best strategy available in order to come up with a solution to the problem. Hopefully this has been entertaining and somewhat informative on how a game works back and forth, introduction of many new tags that you would have never seen before, and given you a bit more insight into what it looks like. Otherwise, that has been everything, and have a nice day.